Corrupted file accessed. Archive. Date September 2025. Not for public use. The Good Company.
I don't know who you are. What are you doing here? Stop!
The Institute for Historical Preservation, a branch of the Good Company, has been working hard to know all, to see all, to remember all.
So you just want me to talk about my work?
The work of one doctor from the mid-2020s evolved into a workable way to store all information and communicate efficiently.
But it's not like my work, because it's from the future.
Just to be clear, they weren't a medical doctor, nor a linguistics doctor. They're an amateur when it came to linguistics.
Also, it's like shit.
Melamba's work would go on to cause much damage to the preservation of historical fact and the mission of the Good Company, that it necessitated the eradication of the idea's power. But we must preserve the attempt at least, so that the damage of conlangs that are downright cursed need not be repeated. We decided to use the opportunity while we were there to destroy the work, to also allow them the courtesy of recording what they would have done, even while burning the notes they had. Here we present the work of Melamba, on the language of trees and wind, sadly never to be used.
Hi, hello, greetings, was Melamba. I work in psychology, but to a certain extent, languages. Listen, can you hear that? You can't, because we're inside. I don't know why they thought that this would work in the script. The sound of trees, whispering in the wind. Whispering, that turn of phrase is not merely metaphorical, but also substantiated by the work that I would have done in the coming years. From close observation of tree growth, analysing many thousands of audio samples from trees around the globe, as well as hacking into the Met Office, I did not. I worked out the language trees use to communicate, and formed it into a language humans might be able to use. Let's begin with the trees. Trees use the unique shape and distribution of their leaves, in conjunction with the precise foreknowledge of how the wind will blow, to modulate and form sentences of changing pitch. Their grammar is inflected via creaking in the wood, and all in a pursuit of the rhizomatic well-being of plants. The precise foreknowledge comes from the fact that wind, and really any chaotic medium, demonstrates sensitive behaviour to initial and intermediary actions and forces, meaning all previous messages made into the wind are carried over in the precise arrangement they are now. Thereby, the observation and tracking of wind, and the communication through it in turn changing the wind, allows trees to forecast with incredible accuracy wind conditions in the future for their next message. The large amount of information this provides from the wind in turn lends itself to a context-heavy language, with many cases of evidentiality that would need to be adapted if we were to ever learn to even speak a small version of their mighty language. Why would I say?
The very initial work in the language of trees and wind was not very useful for humans, nor would it have been useful for the Good Company had there not been adaptations made for human speech, but those initial notes would come to be the basis for a very different language.
In 2030, I had grasped enough of the language of the trees and wind that I could make a first foray into a human adaptation. It had a 7-tone system with the use of fricatives to aid in the signposting of context, and plosives being used to mark grammatical creakemes. They're plosives, why not use creakiness? But once this was revealed to the world and published, I needed to make adjustments so that the stupid masses could stand a chance at picking up my great invention. This doesn't sound at all like me, you little...
Apologies for the interruption. We often find people reticent to accept their future. We can assure you that the agents did no harm, and Melamba had signed our consent forms. They shortly resumed the filming for the Good Company.
In order to increase the clarity of comprehension and the ease of use, the tonemes had corresponding vowels: e. This wasn't enough, so clarifying approximates were added to distinguish between vowels close in the mouth. W between e and r between and between and between r and a. But people struggled to use the approximates, the bilabial simply becoming the labial vela, w, the rhotics merge, and so became r, or whatever it was for your locally sourced language. L became anything from the lateral fricative sh to a palatal fricative sh, while the vela also turned into a fricative and easing its way to the back of the throat, furthering into the uvular fricative ch, or into the trail ch. This happened over the course of a decade of use, and by the end had created a double use case of fricatives, and unfortunately only increased ambiguity, and my goal of adding clarity and creating an easy language that was so context heavy that truth would win out was slipping away. So an ingressive-egressive change was made to the way grammar worked, but we haven't talked about grammar much, so let's circle back to it now. The grammar was partly what interested the good company so much. Given the trees had layers upon layers of evidentiality and the company's goal of informational truth, they saw it as a language of good, just as Turkey Pona before it. How foolish they had been. Common grammatical forms include a VSO word order, with the subject tucked inside a conjugation of the verb as an affix, like in Spanish. Tense is conjugated in a prefix of the verb. When the object is possessive, this is also augmented to be a single reflexive verb, conjugated once for subject and then a second time for object, as a conjugation order is not commutative. Prepositions often take the place of the object in the verb-subject conjugation, and direct and indirect pronouns can take the place of the object in a reflexive conjugation, or act as an affix on the noun, or even conjugate the creakenes. Adjectives come after nouns, negation comes before verbs, adverbs come after prepositions, after objects, loanwords are taken over as best they can. As I may have said, fricatives were used initially to add, or supplement for the advanced speaker, the wind-based evidentiality and context-based trees relied on, and plosives replaced the grammar held in the creaking of trees. But this is a specifically macro-grammatical structure. That is the whole reason creakenes are needed in the first place. You see, trees have a seven-fold system of making a statement that I adapted for human use, following the structure of 1. Declarance, saying what you're about to speak. 2. Reflexance, who you are to say anything at all, similar to a cross between an ID number and what anthropologists do at the beginning of their studies to say who they are. 3. Evidence, in addition to the wind-based context, one must also declare where the reference came from internally, what cross-section of the past has allowed this reference to be made. 4. The reference, the statement itself. 5. Elaborance, specification of what the statement means. 6. Parlance, an extension of possible connections should other trees wish to pick up on the reference. 7. Exunts, saying that you're about to stop speaking. This helpfully abbreviates to dreripe. Between each section is a grammatical creakeme. They're plosives, I don't know why you call them this, which is used to indicate progression from one section to another. But there exists a significant divergence in the human adaptation here. That is the reason the idea must be neutralized. To make, for example, a reflexance possible means statements must be made, references, which in turn must follow the dreripe structure. In turn, those references, and the dreripe structure within them, must also follow the dreripe structure, and so in turn this pattern continues for each section, recursively necessitating the dreripe structure. This might seem like an impossibly fractaled language, but it isn't, at least not for the trees. They easily sidestep this issue by themselves demonstrating a structure similar to this, trunks breaking down into branches, into twigs, into leaves. Infinity divided by infinity is finite. But humans are limited in this capacity, so we pull on a more rhizomatic rather than arborescent structure to be able to adapt this complex nested grammar. Rather than containing in the statement the dreripe structure in order to get all the detail needed, we can instead embed our statements in affixed and prefixed statements that are the contextual map of human existence. Here is a diagram that I would have drawn had I not been stopped.
Alongside this explanation and diagram, we provide a spoken sample which might aid in understanding what went wrong. Alongside the audio, we provide what we thought it meant. Unfortunately, it is probable that there are many hidden messages in this sample alone. We do not quite know what agma schwa means nor what a cursed Conlang is, so let this be a warning that when people make languages, they are often planning activities unseen.
Saya Eresh Ria Thara Sia Ayavisa Ra Thewias Ra Arafa Shasia Ayerishi Sasha Thesa Lasha Twaya Saya Ra Pivaya Sesha Yasha Tayalethia Thasisa Lasha Wera Resithasa Thewis What there is Thara Iya there is Reza Seva Rabi Oasi with Isha Iwereza Rabi Sasaha Isha Osiris Rafise Fiasi Ayalapaf Wisra Ella Aserish Bi Fafisa Serish Wasashere Jayala Ayala Fafis Ayayueresa Ayab Allah Elasifi Allah Elasi Isha Pishesira Joyafis Safi Thesaha Isha Jafia Seri Fi Pishiresef Esas Pa Shasfa Wisha Isha Pavayas Ri with Esas Piakfasha Afia Yasasha Isefisha Pa Ethafi Ya Asha You with it Ahosia Jaivesha Pi with it Ahoshas Risfaf Rashi with a After that demonstration, you can probably see how useful and good this form of the language could be, but it did not last long, unfortunately, for after Milamba's death, that's my death, that's strange, language evolution happened. The lead linguist of the Good Company, following my death, decided that added nasals, and clicks were needed in the pre- and post-statement context, but people quickly disliked the clicks' difficulty and found the nasals grating alongside the ingressive-egressive panting. Yet despite this setback, the language was kept alive throughout the rest of the century due to the work of the Good Company with my invention. However, in the early 2140s, a new evolution happened. People just started telling each other the Mossy context in whatever language they had in common, and eventually over the next 50 years created a pidgin sign language to supplement the vocal statements that completely undermined the good work of their organisation. These sign languages got re-articulated as stress and manual clicks, while tones and vowels diverged, vowels becoming decoupled from the tonal system and gaining slightly more variance, evolving with time, and tone only being part of the person identifier of Reflexance and becoming co-opted into the stress patterns that had evolved. The approximates and their evolutions that had also been used for clarity became blurred into the fractal grammatical markers, and fricatives and plosives evolved a constant harmony in several morphological cases. And despite the efforts of the Good Company, the convolutions of grammar only got worse. Some dissident linguists realised that they could use some of the original structure of trees and wind based upon my notes to totally subvert the efforts of the Good Company to monopolise the language. Unfortunately, this utterly destroyed the language as it had been made, which is when the Good Company stepped in to come back in time to stop me. The dissident linguists made simple Durapair sentences, but then strung them together, spoken together with others, following others interweaving with each other, but no specific context, for the wind became their context, just as the trees had done, but not a literal wind, references to memory with no structure, or rather the structure they did form was an overlapping mess. The structure that they followed was similar to the original Dryoped design of a branch with twigs and leaves branching out from it. Rather than prepositions and conjugations being used to be able to string two parts of the sentence together, now a new grammatical branch needed to be formed, and the fractal structure is indeed back, but it is arbitrarily cut and pruned, grown and added to. The reflexive verb structures are not used, instead the object is declined for possession and direct and indirect pronouns. The good company tried to recover their language, but they just needed to cut this timeline off before the language got any worse. And so they would have come back, preventing me from my initial findings even before I had a doctorate. But this is not the end of the story. The good company is a foolish, bureaucratic beast, only able to view things via what it already knows. The evolutions that people made to the language and its grammar and its phonemes were valuable in creating resistance that would one day finally stand a chance at stopping the good company in its infancy. That is, the resistance came back in time, before the good company arrived and allowed me to film this version of the script. The language they formed is new, it's beautiful. I will admit it is slightly horrible, but it's anomalous. It's full of plot holes, but they tell us about the speakers. It's full of holes that echo in the wind. I may stop speaking, but nothing is secure or contained in that stopping. The good company is not protected. My future self has given me enough information to stop their efforts and work out a way to publish the information without giving them any indication of how bad the language could ever get. In fact, future me is much more adept at speaking this more evolved form of the language, and so I will leave it to them to give you a demonstration.
Hello, this is indeed future me, with a spoken sample of ŝiĉaĉo. Aŝeŝoti, mitapefin, tiathsoskam, uofkam, shuasei, pikam aŝeŝififochai, epaf thatutos saio. Achmashwach fim tung. Afwofokam seipi. Okachia Assessus thochai. Ʃiĉaĉo. Tun aŝeĉo. Sia shocha. Hwefesh pato. Fon. Pioso. Ŝesotiofa. Apafi. Ŝaĉi. Ŝaĉo. Hwofo. Ashe. Akfo. Hufim. Thatus. Kun. Apafi. Ŝaĉso. Ashe. Setrosa. Asetush. Shafusa. Thiosu. Tun. Asecho. Ichashim. Siesho chafim. Osefofteti. Ashe. Sashuchetu. Tepifu. Tun. Asakohaiko. Shio. Fatesusho. Chum. Afesiso. Thutiosho. Tum. Ashe. Kach. Shasuch. Asheoch. Spesh. Chafim. Kum. Chim. Tum. Ashu. Shiso. Thasoteo. Chim. Apafishoto. Thotesfim. Iashusho. Tum. Ashethuto. Thosesioteshu. Chim. Apafisethetu. Thihuis. Pa. Oshecho. Huafokam. Ashecho. Huepo. Pasho. Fuhuepopa. Pa. Ashecho. Suthotekam. Tung. Thetutesho. Huesho. Ashes. Ushosasho. Shutetho. Otesh. Fin. Tung. Asheoch. Susachokam. Asatuf. Tung. Thosisho. Oishfim. Thososhethu. Iashu kung. Ta'ung. Ashi. Tucho. Pahwif. Unpa. Atatosu. Unpa. Atatosufim. Shesute. Kung. Thesis. Kung. Chum. Ashe. Shu hofi. Hakocha. Ushate. Eshe. Satufoti. Tum. Shutosho. Akma shwach. Kum. Ump. Apathisosthoti. Sikesha chofim. Tapaf. Huihaka. Nk. Nch. Pio. Esho eso. Asesh. Tung. Afwafakam. Sepi. Okachia. Kung. Apathi. Thashachu. Usof. Unpa. Sichu. Such. Theme. Unk. Unpa. Atotash. Kung. Kum. Try saying that 5 times fast.